Alright, so what we're going to do today is go through the process of adding a second domain controller to an existing domain. Now, various reasons you might want to do this, but our reason in our home lab is that we want to replicate a corporate environment, and most businesses will have at least a second DC for fault tolerance, reliability, things of that nature. So a simple example would be if the main DC was to go down or offline for whatever reason, people and the company can still operate, log in, etc. So at least one good reason why you'd want to have one. So in our scenario, I'm using VirtualBox. Now, if you haven't set up your main infrastructure yet, so you haven't got your primary domain controller, which I've got named as Server 19 DC01, and your clients attached, etc. If you haven't got that, then what I suggest you do is follow my lab tutorial. I'll leave a link in the description below, and then you can get set up and your main infrastructure up and running. We're going to add the next step, which is our second DC. Now, for the VirtualBox manager, what you can do is you can just copy, if you create a new instance, and basically copy the virtual settings that you've got for your main DC01. So the same RAM, the same hard disk space, CPU, all of that, just keep it the same. All right. We're going to attach the ISO image, so the server image, to this server, and then we'll literally start everything from ground zero. Now, if you've got enough system capacity, then just leave DC01 running, and we'll start DC02 now. If you can't do that because the system's going to lag and it crashes, then just turn off DC01 for now, and you can turn it on at a later stage. The bit that you need to get up to is you've created a VM template for this, attached the ISO, and then clicked start to run the machine. Once you've done that, you'll be at this stage, which it'll prompt you to start the installation. So we'll literally go through this from this very step. So we'll click next, and we'll click install now. And then what I'll do is, for periods of time where we're just waiting around, which as an installation of Windows, there's going to be some time that we do that, then I'll just fast forward the video just so you're aware, and then we'll skip to the main bit. Now, if you've got your server set up and running already for your second DC, then I'll leave a link in the description, a timestamp in the description, and you can just skip to the next stage. But for everyone else, we'll start from here. So we want the standard desktop evaluation. So this is the GUI version, and we'll click next. We'll accept the license terms and click next. We want to do a custom install. Right, can't find any drives. Why can't you do that? Okay, so probably a setting in my VM. So let me just turn this off. And we'll double check the settings, which is probably good for this video. You can see what I've got if you want. So the name of this machine, we're going to call it Server 19 DC02. We'll disable all of that, that's fine. System, so I've got base memory or RAM, got 4 gig, got hard disk, that's all fine. Processor, I've got 2. Again, these are going to vary based on your machine, but broadly speaking, and depending on how much physical resources you've got, I'd go for around 25% of what you have as a good number. Right, storage, add hard disk, create a virtual hard disk. We'll go with the standard, click choose, click OK. Right, let's start that machine again. Hopefully we're okay. And hopefully by allocating it some hard disk space, we won't get the same issue we had before. Okay, fine. So that is what it was. So we'll click the unallocated space, we'll click next, and we'll start installing Windows. Almost when it's done, the machine will restart, so keep letting it do that until it's finally done. You'll notice when that is because it will just stop at all activity. Now that's fine, you don't need to do anything here, just let it do its thing. Again, no need to do anything here, just let it keep restarting. Alright, so now we can start working on it again. What it wants to do is create a root administrator account, otherwise you can't really do anything. So this one you need to keep a note of, otherwise you won't be able to log into the machine. So set yourself a password, probably write it down. I wouldn't normally say that, but we're doing a home lab. And then we'll click finish. So because it's in a virtual machine, you can't actually click Control-Alt-Delete. So what you do is input and you send that command from VirtualBox into the machine and then enter the password that you just created and we'll log in. So at this stage, we are just a random administrator, random server. There's no connection to the main DC. We're just spinning up a new instance. Okay, so it can pick up, because I've got my primary DC, so I'm going to interchangeably call the main DC a primary DC or DC01 or DC01. They'll all mean the same thing. So apologies if I mix and match terminology, but they all mean the same thing. So because DC01 is switched on, so I've got that in the lab, as you can see it's running, that network has picked it up. So I'm going to click yes. If you don't see that, it's probably because you haven't got the DC01 running or you haven't got the network adapters, the NICs configured to do so. I'm going to click yes in mine, get rid of that. And then a few things we're going to need to do. Before we can even think about making this a secondary DC or DC02, we need to set a static IP address. Click on Network and Internet Settings. Okay, so in my machine, I've got two adapters. If you follow my tutorial on setting up the main infrastructure, you'll know why that is, unless you've done a similar scenario before. So don't worry, in my setup, I've got one which is the internet NIC, so to let you out and browse websites, etc. The other one is an internal NIC for clients joining the internal AD domain. Alright, so it's joined, it's seeing that as the DNS, picked up its IP address. Hopefully I'll get this right, we'll find out in a minute. So number 2 is my internet, and number 1 is the internal that's created. So with the internal, what we're going to do is we'll set that static. So properties, IPv4, and we're going to put these in. So 172.16.02. So my main primary DC is 01. So I want to make this the next one up. We want the /24 CIDR, so 255, that's fine. Default gateway for this NIC I don't need. So DNS, what I want this server pointing to is the primary DC01. So that's going to be 172.16.01 or whatever the IP address is of your primary DC. And then as the secondary DNS, we want it to point to this server, so the server itself. So you can either put that address back in, or you can use the loop back address, which is 127.0.0.1. So we'll click OK, and we'll rename this as well. So I want this called internal. I want this named internet. Also, I'm just going to add DC02 or 2, and we'll do the same here. If we've got troubleshooting between the DCs, we've got a clue as to which one is which. So DC2. There we go. Right, so let's just do command prompt again. So just press the up arrow, enter. There we go. So the IPv4 static address has now been set at 172.16.0.2. Cool, that's what we want to do. So that is fine. We've changed the DNS to point to the primary server. Now what we want to do is change the computer name. So let's go to system. Button doesn't work, but rename this PC. Oh, decided to work, that's fine. The other way we could do it, if this doesn't work, click on system info and then change settings. And then what we can do is change the name and also join the domain at the same time. Here it gives you that option. So we're going to call this, just look at the naming convention I've put on here. There we go, server 19 DC. Just want to look at this machine. So this is my DC01. Okay, so that's called server 2019-DC. And we want that a domain member. So we'll put in the name of our domain, which in my case is TechBeats. Let me just double check that actually. Domain. It's actually techbeats.co.uk. All right, so I just put the full website in. Okay, so that's how you check your domain. And we need to put it in like that, otherwise it's not going to find it. And we'll click OK once we're sure. Looks fine to me. And then it will prompt us for an admin credential. Normally it has to be admin, but I have seen it work without, which is rather strange and a bit of a security issue, but another conversation. So what we're doing is approving the request to join the main domain. So it needs to be an admin, ideally an admin user from your DC01 infrastructure. Okay. So it now says welcome to the techbeats.co.uk domain, which is okay. It needs to restart. So let's do that. We'll just go over to DC01 and we'll go to AD users and computers and just see if we can spot it yet. There we go. So at the moment, it's showing up as a computer. So server 2019 DC2. Okay. What we want to do is make sure it shows up here. So we'll check all that in a second. DC02, so it's restarted again. Fine, let's go in. And we'll check the command prompt again. Unfortunately, because I haven't now got it up, we can't compare, but obviously rewind the video if you need to. The other thing that you need to make sure is that your time, day, time zones are all the same. So between DC01, DC2 and any other domain controllers that you want to set up, they all need to be matching. Mine are, so we'll move on. And now we're at the stage where we can start to actually go through the process of adding this server as a DC to the existing domain. So this is the part that you would have wanted to skip to if you'd already had the infrastructure on the virtual machine set up already. So this is the point where we'll continue on from, so everyone's caught up. So the first thing we need to do is install Active Directory domain services on this server. So if you haven't got this up already, you'd click on Start, open Server Manager. Then we'll go on Manage and Add Roles and Features. Click Next. We do want the default option of role-based or feature-based installation. Server selection. Yeah, that looks fine. So just make sure your new server is selected, which is usually by default anyway. So that's fine. We'll click Next. Now, the role that we want to add, as we mentioned, is Active Directory Domain Services. So the second one down. We'll need to include these management tools. So leave that as it is. So add features. We don't need any other additional features. So click on Next. There we go. We don't need to use this functionality for this tutorial. So click Next. And that all looks fine to me. So we can just click on Install and it will start adding that server role now. So we'll just give that a bit of time so I can get that up to date. Right, so as you can see, we've got our installation succeeded and we can now click Close. Brilliant. So that bit's out of the way. Step 2, we just need to promote this server to a DC. So during these steps, what we'll do is add the new domain controller to the existing domain. So while you're in the server manager, what we need to do is click on this warning sign, the notifications, and it will give you the option to promote the server to a domain controller. Click on that, and we want the first option. Now you'll notice when you first set up your infrastructure, your primary DC, you'd click on Add New Forest because there's nothing to add the new DC to. In this case, we do. So we want to leave the default option, add a domain controller to an existing domain, and it's picked up the domain as techbeats.co.uk because we joined to it earlier, so it's got that information. And what we want to do is add the credentials so it can do that. So we'll just put the administrator one in, click OK, and now we can click Next. Now in the domain controller options page, we can leave the default item selected, it's fine. You only need to enter the DSRM password twice. And this is for restoring the database if you ever need to. So we'll put that in and we'll click Next. Okay, this warning is fine. You don't need to do anything with that. It's normal and you can skip it. Click Next. Okay, I've got an error on my machine which is unusual, but we'll try and go ahead anyway. And that's fine. We can leave the folder defaults as folder paths as they are. And then we'll click Next. Fingers crossed it works okay. So all prerequisite checks pass successfully. We can click on install to carry on. So let's do that. And again, we'll just give it some time to get all that set up. Now it should automatically restart or reboot the machine, but if it doesn't, then do that. I'm just going to let it do what it needs to, catch up with it in a moment. While it's doing that, I'm just going to hop over to the main DC, DC01, and let's just see if we can start to see when it joins as a DC. Okay, so it's no longer in the computer, so hopefully it's in the DCs. There we go. So there's DC2 now, which is what we're after. Cool. Obviously something's working on our DC02 as we want it to, so we'll hop back here. As you can see, it's just restarting, so not quite finished, so give it a bit of extra time. Lovely, so DC02 looks like it's finished doing what it needs to, so we'll log in. Okay, looks like it's loading up fine, so we'll minimize, or let's just hop over back to DC01, and we can see as our verification step remains there, which it should do anyway. But that's how you'd verify it has joined as a domain controller, and it's no longer showing as a standard computer. The other thing that we're going to do is we'll just verify it by a PowerShell utility called Repadmin. Now, we want to be on the new server, so that is DC02. Come out of that, minimize this, open PowerShell. What we want to do is type repadmin. So repadmin /rep summary. And then the name of this machine. So we called it server 2019-DC2. Don't know if it's case sensitive, but we'll find out now. If we just take a moment to read this. So 0% error. That's your main DC, so there's no errors reported on there. And this is our destination one, so the one we're on. And as you can see, there's no errors there either. And rep-L basically stands for replication. So what we're checking to see if there were any errors during the replications. Last step in this is that we just need to configure the DNS servers correctly on the two domains, or double check them. The preferred DNS server should ideally point to the other alternate DC. And then the alternate DNS server, so that's the second entry, should point to itself or the loopback address. Now, we did that already when we set up DC02, as you saw when we were going through it. So we just need to make sure we just add that entry in DC01 now that it actually exists. So let's go on to network and settings. Remember, we're in DC01. View adapter options. Let's go. Network and sharing center. We want to go to internal properties, IPv4. There you go. So 172.16.0.1. Remember, I was saying that is the static IP address of my primary DC01. And then at the moment, it's got itself because DC02 didn't exist when this was being set up. So we'll change this to, we want to make alternate DNS server itself. So using the loopback address. 1. And then we want to make this DC02. So 172.16.0.2 or whatever the address for your DC02 machine. And we'll click OK, OK, and close. That is now done. So you'll be pleased to know that's everything done. So just to wrap up, so adding a domain controller to an existing domain is pretty straightforward, as you've seen. Make sure you configure the DNSs correctly, otherwise replication will probably fail. Hopefully you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.